The revival and the reinterpretation of the Marilwyd in Wales. There has been a movement in recent years to revive a number of old British folk customs, which had all but died out until recent times. And this revival seems to have been particularly successful in Wales. The Marilwyd is one such custom which has enjoyed a revival with an online database of Marilwyds and other beasts, now containing over 50 listings, including some in other countries, even as far away as Australia. The Marilwyd is an old Welsh custom, though it is unknown exactly how old, in which a horse's skull is carried in a procession by a troop of people, the bearer being covered in a white shroud, such that they look like a ghostly horse figure, led by an osier and followed by a troop of different characters. The characters traditionally included Punch and Judy, Bunch and Sioan, and in some places a merryman and a sergeant. The Marilwyd troop would traditionally go from house to house, knocking on doors and engaging in the punco, a kind of Welsh rap battle, with the householders, where a verse would be sung by the Marilwyd troop, to which the householders would have to respond in sung verse, taking it in turns in competition until either the Marilwyd troop or the householders conceded defeat. If the householders won, then the Marilwyd would go on to the next house. But if the Marilwyd troop won, then the householder would have to invite them in and provide them with beer and food. In return, the Marilwyd would provide a blessing to the household. In modern revivals, the Marilwyd troop is more likely to visit the local pubs than to call on people's houses, as few people would be prepared for the ensuing punco. The Marilwyd might also make an appearance at certain festivals and is often associated with another old custom, that of wassailing, Welsh gwaseila. Wassailing involves blessing the apple trees and asking for a good harvest, and wassail festivals involve singing, dancing and cider drinking. The Chepstow wassail at Marilwyd, held in January, became such a popular event that it had to be cancelled in 2020 before the COVID-19 outbreak because of health and safety concerns due to the large numbers of people attending, having increased from the usual 5 or 6 Marilwyd troops attending to around 20 to 30. The plan was to either find a new venue for the pageant which can support greater numbers or to have more but smaller events, and the latter appears to be happening now, with various wassailing and Marilwyd events now happening all over Wales, and even, indeed, some in England. The Chepstow Festival includes a Marilwyd pageant where individuals and groups bring their beasts to Chepstow for the festival from all over Wales and England, along with other folk characters such as the Green Man. The Chepstow Festival includes a meeting on the border, which is known as the oldest new tradition in Wales, where English wassailers and Welsh Marilwyd troops meet together at the border, where flags are exchanged and drinks shared, a festival of peace and comradeship, perhaps aimed at healing the wounds between the Welsh and the English. The revival of the Marilwyd has become particularly popular with neo-Druidic and neo-pagan groups, who consider the Marilwyd to be a survival of ancient pagan customs, and connected with Celtic goddesses such as Epona and the Welsh character Rhiannon, who many modern pagans also consider to be an ancient goddess. The Anglesey Druid Order have created their own Mari, for which they carry out an awakening ceremony each December, in which prayers and invocations are made to Rhiannon, whom they considered to be an otherworldly goddess connected with horses. Swansea Pagan Moot and Pontypridd Pagan Moots also have their own Marilwyds. Kite of Swansea Pagan Moot gives it a mystical interpretation as such. Welsh folklore identifies the whiteness as a feature of otherworld denizens, so this bright, shining spirit horse crosses the otherworld, and as the otherworld does, especially in Welsh lore, breaks upon us with an encounter and a challenge. As an otherworldly emissary, the Marilwyd promises well-being, prosperity and sovereignty over fate for the coming year. Yet her pale skeletal presence oozes threat, for horror, death and oppression are never far from otherworld dramas. That's taken from Kite's Cradle website. The Marilwyd is associated by modern pagans with the Lord of Misrule traditions and the Roman feast of Saturnalia, of which the Epenalia, festival of the horse goddess Epona, was a part, celebrated on 17th of December, a time of upsetting the usual order of things, and the kind of chaos which occurs when the otherworld encroaches on the human world, a festival which takes place during the uncertainty of the winter months, when death through cold or starvation was a very real possibility. The punko then becomes a sort of negotiation with the otherworld, with death itself, and the welcoming of the otherworld into one's home, bringing a blessing to the household for the ensuing year. Christopher Hughes of the Anglesey Druid Order writes of the Mari: "As the feasting of solstice and Christmas move into full swing, the Marilwyd appears in darkened streets. Her troop, who themselves represent the dead, guide her to the enticing lights of celebration. They lead a stark white skull of a horse, adorned in ribbons, a flowing white gown about her form, with jaws that snap at those whose poetic prowess fails to gain her admiration. She comes from the land of the dead, from the otherworld, a reminder of the function of winter and the mysteries of life, death and rebirth. She is shrouded in mystery. Her origins are unknown. Some claim that the tradition reaches back to pagan times. Others claim an unbroken tradition of bringing out the Mari. The truth of her history may never be revealed to us, and to an extent this matters not. What does matter is that she lives. She is a living tradition, and one that is enjoying a revival in Wales and further afield. A living tradition changes with time and with a people that imbibe life into the remnants of ancient practice." The Marilwyd also has a popular following with a website which informs the public of Marilwyd appearances around the country, and some loyal followers travelling to different places to see her. Cardboard Marilwyd kits, including mini Marilwyds, are now available to purchase from Track, Folk Development for Wales, for everyone who wants to get in on the act. There is even a Snapchat app that allows you to turn yourself into a Marilwyd, such is its popularity. The Marilwyd has become a symbol of Welsh culture, preserving a sense of quirkiness, otherworldliness and difference to English customs. Though similar customs, such as the obios of Cornwall, exist in England, most of the English folk customs, with a few exceptions, tend to be less otherworldly and more associated with summer and fertility. The Marilwyd is sometimes described as an ancient Welsh custom, even dating back to Roman times and the festival of Epona, or to Iron Age horse sacrifice rituals, though there is no actual evidence of it being a surviving pagan horse cult. The Marilwyd may evoke a memory of the ancient sacredness of horses. The horse was revered amongst the Iron Age Celts as a symbol of power and fertility, and associated with deities such as the Gaulish goddess Epona. White animals in particular were often seen as sacred in myth and folklore, and are imbued with the ability to cross from the other world to our world. The stark whiteness of the Marilwyd, a white skull with a white shroud, reflects this belief. Horses were also in ancient times representative of the sovereignty within the land. Although the Mari appears as a dead horse, her appearance each winter evokes a sense of ancient mystery. So what is the true origin of the Marilwyd? The custom of dramatic mumming, of which the Marilwyd may be seen as an example, is a relatively modern practice. The earliest recorded mentions of the Marilwyd are from the late 18th century, when J. Evans wrote A Tour Through Part of North Wales, in which he describes a man dressed in blankets with a fractious head like a horse, who knocks on doors of houses, then runs around within the house, with an uncommon frightful noise which the company quit in real or pretended fright. However, the Marilwyd is more commonly associated with South Wales, and a more detailed description is given by Evans in his 1804 book, Letters Written During a Tour Through South Wales, in which he describes how teams of people accompanied a man dressed as a horse and toured the local area from Christmas to Twelfth Night, and that householders would give them food or money. An 1819 account from West Glamorgan, cited by Owen, says that the Marilwyd was called Aderin B. Lwyd, a grey magpie, and was accompanied by a troop which included a horse groom and attendants who would profit from the expedition. Many people believe that the Marilwyd goes back to earlier times, but there is a lack of any earlier references, though some believe that the Marilwyd may have emerged from a documented craze for hobby horses in the elite of British society in the 16th and 17th centuries, and that this originally elite practice disseminated down to other social classes. Shakespeare mentions the hobby horse in Hamlet. For oh, the hobby horse is forgot, describing Hamlet's memory of a forgotten hobby horse. According to Pickley, 2013, in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the term hobby horse had a variety of meanings and could refer to a small breed of Irish horse, a wickerwork prancing and dancing horse of the Morris dance, and a foolish person or a wanton woman. Pickley says, "The hobby horse, together with old wives' tales and fairies, was evocative and symbolic of a popular culture which was simultaneously remembered and forgotten, cherished and recalled with nostalgia as merry old England, while being stigmatised by the growing emotional and attitudinal distance on the part of the more educated and the middling sorts." In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, popular culture became commercialised and was appropriated by royalty and the upper classes. Shakespeare's character Hamlet is a prince reminiscing with some nostalgia about a carnivalesque folk custom adopted by the upper classes, and this recollection occurs directly before the murder of Gonzago, bringing a sense of contrast and ambiguity, nostalgia and grotesque mortality. Pickley says, "Hamlet represents a specific period in transition when what is being lost and forgotten is still fresh in memory, i.e. the ghost of popular culture haunts the play so strongly that hobby horses, fools and such phenomena are forgotten and remembered with the same power, while a decade later commercialised and written forms of popular culture overwrite and seem gradually to efface the original ones." Elite hobby horse traditions, then, can be seen to have been adopted from earlier popular culture, and the meaning of these traditions in earlier popular culture are lost in time. The Marilwyd itself is certainly a tradition of popular culture rather than an elite tradition. William Roberts, a Baptist minister, wrote an essay on the Marilwyd in 1852, in which he linked the custom with Catholic veneration of the Virgin Mary, as well as with Saturnalia and with medieval mystery plays. Roberts saw the Marilwyd festivities as being a sinful mix of old pagan and popish ceremonies, both of which he abhorred, and wrote his book Crefydd yr Oesoedd Tuach, Religion of the Dark Age, to condemn such customs. Indeed, one of the possible meanings of the name Marilwyd is Blessed Mary, and although a ghostly horse's skull would seem a rather odd way to depict the Blessed Virgin, Trevor Owen, in The Celebration of Candlemas in Wales, reports that there was a Welsh custom of singing Candlemas carols at the doors of houses and wassailing at the beginning of February for the Gwyl Fair, Mary's festival. Owen quotes William Williams, who says that groups of people would go to the doors of houses where they knew that there would be food and drink provided, and that they would sing burlesque and ludicrous songs in honour of the Virgin Mary. The householders would answer with verses previously prepared, and if outwitted, would have to allow the company in and entertain them. Although there is no mention of a horse's skull in any of the Candlemas traditions, the punko, which is a feature of the Marilwyd celebrations, is clearly described. I have heard mention in folklore circles the idea that the horse's head could later have been introduced to represent the donkey that the Virgin rode. Roberts, in his description, says that the Marilwyd brings to mind the festival of the Feast of the Ass, which was a commemoration of the flight into Egypt of Mary and Joseph, which was historically celebrated on 14th of January and was associated with mystery plays. The Marilwyd itself could therefore represent the donkey Mary rode in this story. Roberts wished that customs such as the Marilwyd would find no place anywhere apart from the museum of the historian and antiquary. But in writing his book, he ensured that details of the custom, including the punko, were preserved, though it has been suggested that the revival of the Methodist and Baptist chapels in Wales may have contributed to the decline of folklore traditions in Wales, including the Marilwyd. However, Owen suggests that the decline of the Marilwyd custom may have been more to do with changing social conditions in South Wales and the move from tight-knit communities with few public festivals or opportunities for public entertainment during the winter months to a society which is more mobile and changing, less community-based, where there is more public entertainment all year round, including organised events to celebrate Christmas and the New Year. The Marilwyd had all but died out by the middle of the 20th century, its appearance being limited to a handful of villages, and the tradition was revived in Llancynoed in the 1960s after a few decades of its absence. In the 1980s, Caerphilly, Llantrisant and St Fagans also revived the tradition, perhaps because there was a renewed sense of wanting to reaffirm Welsh cultural identity following the closing of traditional industries such as coal mining. Another folk story of the Marilwyd, linking it to the Virgin Mary, is that it represents the spirit of a mare which was evicted from its stable in Bethlehem, so that Mary and Joseph could stay in the stable and the pregnant Mary could give birth to Jesus there. The mare, however, was itself pregnant, and being cast out of the stable, wandered around seeking shelter, but found none, and died giving birth to its foal. Since then, its spirit has returned around Christmas time every year, going from house to house seeking food and shelter, bringing blessings to those who let it in, and curses to those who don't. The first curator of the Welsh Folk Museum, Lwyd Peat, was, however, of the persuasion that the Marilwyd originated as an ancient pagan horse custom, and that the mare was an Anglo-Saxon demonic spirit, the origin of the word nightmare. He also believed that the Marilwyd custom was linked with wassailing, and that a variant to the wider wassailing traditions that existed around the British Isles. Although he gives no evidence for this, he believed that this became associated with medieval Mary feasts before the Reformation, a time of change not only of religion from Catholicism to Protestantism, but from manorial culture to market farming. The once popular customs of wassailing, carol singing and the Marilwyd began to die out in the 20th century, but the Marilwyd continued in certain small towns such as Llancynoed and Llantrisant. A number of different songs are sung. In these customs, there is an emphasis on community, of coming in from the cold and receiving sustenance, with a threat of bad luck or evil gossip if this is refused. The folklore writer Mary Trevelyan wrote that during the 17th and 18th centuries, the custom of the Marilwyd was called Marilwyd, or Great Death, and that it symbolised the dying year. However, there are no written sources for the Marilwyd from the 17th century, and no records of its name being derived from Grey Death elsewhere. Another derivation which has been suggested for the name of the Marilwyd is that it derives from Merry Lwyd, meaning a merry game, referring to the hijinks which are part of the festival, or that the name is derived from Morris, as in Morris dancing. However, there is no known link between the Welsh Marilwyd custom and Morris dancing, which originated in England, though in modern times both may be included in wassailing festivals. The Marilwyd has, however, appeared under different names in different parts of Wales, being referred to as a wassail, the wassail, in parts of Carmarthenshire, and as a march, the horse, and Gynffasfach, the canvas horse, in parts of Pembrokeshire. Owen, 1987, suggests that the Marilwyd likely had its origin in pre-Christian religious festivities, but that by the time it was recorded in writing, it had lost its religious significance and become a purely secular custom. Ettlinger, 1944, suggests that the Marilwyd is a death horse and originally was part of Samhain celebrations. However, this is unlikely, as Samhain was not celebrated in Wales, but is an Irish and Scottish Gaelic festival. It is possible that related customs in Ireland and Scotland were connected with Samhain, but Nos Calan Gaeth was not celebrated as a festival in Wales until the 19th century, when it became associated with Ysbrydnos, or Spirit Night, a night that the spirits of the dead wandered the earth. Folklorist Christina Hole suggested that the Marilwyd was a bringer of fertility, similar to Obios customs in England. However, the English Obios customs, with the exception perhaps of the Hwdning of Kent and one or two others, are generally celebrated during the spring or summer rather than the winter. And although there are some English examples of a horse's skull being used, the English festivities in the main have far less of a feel of spookiness and otherworldliness. The Welsh custom appears to be connected with death rather than fertility, though would also bring blessings for the coming year, but only after a battle of wits, and if it was treated in the correct manner. There was in the past a tendency for folklorists to interpret all folk customs as being connected with fertility, though in modern times scholars are more cautious about such interpretations, recognising that there are many reasons for the existence and perseverance of folk customs. Welsh poet and translator Vernon Watkins wrote his Ballad of the Marilwyd in 1941, remembering seeing the Marilwyd as a child, and in his poem he has the punco as being between the living and the dead, giving an air of fear and mystery. Watkins was born in Maesteg in Glamorgan, South Wales, an area where the Marilwyd custom persisted. Watkins wrote his poetry in English and was described by Dylan Thomas as the most profound and greatly accomplished Welshman writing poems in English. The poem is evocative, reflecting the otherworldliness, liminality and contradictions of the Mari. The Marilwyd is often presented as a symbol of Welshness and Welsh mystery, but folk customs such as mumming, which may involve animal disguise, were not a purely Welsh custom, but originate in popular theatre. Although the Marilwyd custom contains elements of disguise, liminality and challenge, which are commonly part of ritual, and the horse is a powerful symbol of fertility, strength, wealth and kingship, there is no firm evidence that the Marilwyd is a survival of ancient pagan rituals. Another possible reason for the development of the Marilwyd is that mumming customs became popular in communities which were relatively new in the 19th century, such as mining villages and market towns. The customs such as the challenges, competition, going into households and sharing food and drink are all ways of strengthening community. Owen states that newlyweds and new neighbours were often particularly targeted by the Marilwyd troupe. The practice of the antagonistic challenge of the punko, ending in entering the household and enjoying communal feasting, brings the new household into the community. The Marilwyd, whatever its origins, is enjoying a popular resurgence in Wales, and although the Mari now has followers and sisters as far away as the USA and Australia, it is seen as a symbol of Welshness, a typically Welsh custom, bringing a sense of community and identity not just to new mining communities and market towns, but to Wales. The National Museum of Wales at St Fagans, Cardiff, opened in 1948 and was described by the curator John Geraint Jenkins in 1968 as having the purpose of illustrating the life and culture of a nation, a region or even a village or locality in miniature, the key to the world of ordinary people, to throw light on their ill-documented day-to-day life. Attempts to open a national English folk museum were less successful, though various regional initiatives were set up. Carter argues that nations such as Wales asserted cultural nationalism through their folk museums, but Englishness was less easy to define. The Marilwyd is a folk custom that asserts Welshness. Carter argues that research on folk culture has often been focused primarily on times of progressive political change, times when society was changing towards a new vision, and have therefore often focused on the cultural appropriation of the folk cultures of the common people by the elite, and using them to reinforce traditional social hierarchy. Folk museums, however, according to Jenkins' vision, focus on the culture of the ordinary people. Carter describes folk museums as modern, democratic institutions that fostered the relationship between local identities and citizenship, and says that we need a more sophisticated understanding of lived experience, as distinct from the retrospective and subjective construction of social experience, inflected by memory and nostalgia. Museums have been described as escapist time machines for the present. But Carter argues that there is a difference between lived experience and subjective reconstruction, which aids social change, and that subjective historical experiences could be discovered and remade, serving the physical and emotional needs of their audiences. Folk museums and folk traditions then are a modern educational tool which can be rediscovered and adapted to modern needs. To many fans of the Marilwyd, the need is a spiritual need, a reconnection to the mysteries, an experience of the otherworldliness, liminality and strangeness of the Marilwyd, and a connection to myth and spiritual lore, as well as the experience of coming together as a group of like-minded people to take part in ritualistic folk practice. Whether her origins are pagan or not, the Marilwyd certainly expresses pagan themes, expressing liminality and mystery in a ritualistic manner which brings community together. Whereas the Marilwyd may not necessarily have pagan origins, it certainly has pagan themes, leading us to interact with archetypal and primal forces and to face a spectre of death with its promise of rebirth. It evokes the liminal, employing disguises and an otherworldly guise, and the festival includes contests and challenges, but ends in blessings. The meaning of the name and the origins of the custom are obscure and lost in the mists of time, but it represents a spirit of chaos, taking us away from normal everyday reality. It reflects the special status of horses in many pagan cultures, and also has an association with the wild hunt. For more on the Marilwyd and on horses in folk customs, folklore and mythology, check out my book Mystic Mares and the Marilwyd. Thank you for watching this video, and if you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to my channel.